With typical pomp and ceremony, Britain's Navy says goodbye to Hong Kong with the closure of its shore base, HMS Tamar. It's an emotional occasion for all concerned.
And when that white ensign came down, I had to take a couple of sniffs, I must admit, and wipe away a tear. It was very, very, very emotional for me.
With Britain's last major colony folding, these rituals became a familiar routine. Britain's Hong Kong garrison was the oldest surviving one after Gibraltar, and a plum posting.
It's always had something of mysterious air. It's always been somewhere that people wanted to serve, and people who served there have been envied by those who haven't been able to be.
The military's history has been intertwined with Hong Kong's. It was the Navy which first took Hong Kong Island for Britain, landing at Possession Point in 1841. The British garrison was driven out during the war, but returned triumphantly in 1945.
For the British forces, too, this was a day of special rejoicing. Once again, the Navy, the Army and the Air Force were on parade in the city from which they'd been absent for so long. At their march past, the salute was taken by Admiral Harcourt, the Commander-in-Chief. The double 10th of 1945 marks the beginning of new prosperity for a great city.
With the emergence of communist China, the garrison was strengthened.
Troops of Mao Zedong marched into Shanghai unopposed. Within weeks, they were at the gates of Hong Kong. Troops went out from Britain to reinforce the garrison. Hong Kong was determined to stay British.
You had the revolution, the civil war going on the mainland through all this time. Just across the border, battles being fought, refugees going everywhere. And the British Army was here, and the Navy and the Air Force. You had 30-odd thousand here then. And they were, again, effectively insulating Hong Kong from all these terrible problems.
The war games continued, but in recent times, Britain's soldiers acted less as protectors and more as a backup to the civilian services. In 1992, the police took over border patrol duties. It was a far cry from the early days, when the army built roads, organised relief work and dealt with most security matters.
Then there was quite a deliberate policy over 2 decades, effectively, of creating a self-sufficiency in Hong Kong so that it was able to take care, ultimately, of its own boundaries, to deal with illegal immigration, to deal with smuggling, to deal with disasters, search and rescue, certainly internal security with a very strong and capable police force.
The days of British Hong Kong were always numbered, and with them those of the military. A defence lands agreement between Britain and China signed in 1994 parcelled off all the military sites. 25 go to the government, 14 are to be used by the People's Liberation Army. It's a deal which brought things full circle. Hong Kong taxpayers footed 65% of the yearly costs of the garrison, about $1 billion per annum in recent years. The value of the sites returned to the Hong Kong government in the past 3 years tops $90 billion. In 1994, the drawdown began in earnest. In that year alone, the number of troops diminished from 9,500 to little more than 3,000. There was nothing to do except pack up. Everything from trucks to mess tins have been flogged over the past few years. Even the RAF's trusty Wessex helicopters were sold to Uruguay. 28 Squadron, determined to leave in style, staged a rare fly-past, ending a link stretching back 45 years.
Pilots don't often get the chance to fly in a final formation, and to close down a squadron in the Far East, the very last Far East squadron, is indeed an honour.
And the 3 patrol ships designed especially for Hong Kong waters also have a new home. They've been bought by the Philippines. The troops have been leaving one by one. Hong Kong has been a unique garrison, tri-service and tri-national. That means there were Army, Navy and Air Force units comprising British, Hong Kong Chinese and Nepalese personnel. None were prouder than the Gurkhas. These fighting men from the foothills of the Himalayas had served in Hong Kong since 1948. Because of defence cuts, some troops are being made redundant. Locally enlisted personnel have been given help in finding new jobs in Civvy Street. In the past few months, the giant removals job stepped up a gear.
We don't want anything left behind. I wouldn't mind betting there's the odd soldier, though, who probably decides he's had enough. I don't know. There won't be anything left behind. We'll make sure of that.
Most of the troops' families left in March. Shipping everything out of Hong Kong has been a big undertaking.
I think it's not necessarily large if you compare it to moves such as Bosnia or the Gulf, but I think one, because it's very much in the spotlight, another because it's against a finite time scale, and there is very much one chance, a single shot to get it right. You know, there's no second opportunity. And I think it's that makes it unique and, you know, is the challenge, apart from the size of it.
Lee Doherty will be the last man out. 2 planes full of military personnel will fly out of Kai Tak at 11:30 tonight and about 3 o'clock on the morning of July the 1st. Lee's job includes making the final check.
It's a terrific honour and something that, you know, I'll be able to look on in years to come, I'm sure, in a very positive light.
By the way.
I think there's quite a bit of stick flying around, as you can well imagine.
The Black Watch is the last British regiment to serve in Hong Kong. The pipes and drums of its 1st Battalion are part of this evening's sunset parade and will be there at the midnight ceremony. For the Scottish regiment, it follows a proud tradition. The 2nd Battalion was on hand during India's independence.
Every battalion wants to be places which is a part of a historical event and a place in an interesting time. So we're very lucky to be here. We were in Karachi in 1948. It's sort of by chance almost that we're here, but we're not complaining. We're delighted to be here.
Members of the Black Watch are proud but not overawed.
Being a piper, a drummer or a musician in the military, you play at quite a lot of events. OK, this one's maybe historical, but it's actually no different from any other parade that we've had before. So, I mean, I think it's the occasion, its actual handover is going to make it more special, and probably the guys in parade will probably put more panache.
Right! Yes!
The Black Watch and the many regiments which have gone before them were the visible expression of British sovereignty over the years. As they prepare to march into Hong Kong's history, it's a time for reflection.
We have done what we needed to do in military terms. We've also shown courtesy, professionalism, moderation, and a determination to do things in a way which benefits the local community, benefits the people of Hong Kong.
And as Hong Kong's new garrison prepares to do its duty, Britain's last military chief here offers a view of the territory's future.
I'm optimistic, not because I don't think there may be some political difficulties which may need some time to readjust, to find their point of balance, and so on and so forth. I think that's all very understandable. I'm optimistic, though, because of the underlying energy and dynamism of the place, which I think will carry on whilst these other issues are sorted out above them. I think they're very important that they are sorted out for international confidence. But I think overall I believe in the Hong Kong people, and I hope they will also work their magic on the PLA and come halfway to meet them.
But now the descendants of those who carved a piece of empire half a world away are heading for their final sunset.
At that time in Hong Kong, there was the Royal Scots. They arrived here in 1936.
A lesson in Hong Kong military history for these British soldiers gathered in the Shing Mun Country Park. This is one of the last of the British Army's battlefield tours, a trip around Hong Kong's wartime sites. It often takes a hike, but many of the territory's old defences are still accessible. This trip takes us to the Shinmun Redoubt, built to repel Japanese invaders. It was left woefully undermanned. When the attack finally came in December 1941, the British Imperial forces were taken by surprise.
You've got to remember that the Royal Scots had been fed a lot of information, seeing that the Japanese never attack at night and short-sighted.
Hidden high in the hills, gin drinkers' line, 11 miles of tunnels, bunkers and pillboxes, built in the 1930s as a first line of defence. Long decade, they still clearly bear the names of London streets, names carved by British soldiers a long way from home.
And the whole idea of the tunnels was originally to have a division of about 10 battalions stationed up there to hold it for about 3 weeks while they waited for reserves, extra forces to come up from Singapore. In the end, when the Japanese invaded, they were not expecting an attack from the Japanese from China. They were expecting an attack from the Japanese, as they did in Malaya, from the sea. And we were not prepared. At that time, the Royal Scots were sent there of about 700 men. And they had to try and defend a position of roughly 3 to 4 to 5 miles of about 35 men to every 1,000 metres, which was basically physically impossible.
The British may be leaving Hong Kong, but their wartime history remains. Some want to see it preserved for future generations.
That's why I think, in a way, it would be a good thing if there was some form of interest in battlefield tours in Hong Kong. I think there's a spot for them. Even if it's educational purposes for school children, students, because I'm sure that in general a lot of Hong Kong people, which has been shown by the way they buy memorabilia, colonial memorabilia, there is an interest in the British past in Hong Kong.
And the fall was one of its darkest chapters. Britain had left behind a tiny garrison. Hong Kong was overrun in 18 days. British military historians say the troops never had a chance.
It was quite a small garrison, and it was not expected, Hong Kong was not expected to be able to defend itself for very long. But it did remarkably well in the circumstances. You have to remember that it was a world war, and Japan entered the war, and the day it entered the war, it invaded Hong Kong on day one.
1,500 soldiers, British, Canadian, Chinese, Indian and Portuguese, were killed. The occupation saw hundreds beaten and tortured by the Japanese forces. Soldiers and civilians were interned in camps, deprived of food and water. The liberation, when it came, was 4 years later, in 1945. The dead are remembered in places like these. Saiwan War Cemetery carries the remains of 4,000 people, many killed during the fighting and occupation of Hong Kong.
So it's a unique cemetery. There's very few...
Jack Edwards, a former prisoner of war in the Far East, has spent years campaigning for the rights of ex-servicemen and their dependents. He knows the names of many of those buried here. Some he fought alongside, some are lost to history.
His name is nameless, but as it says on the bottom, see, known unto God, right? So he is known only unto God, but he's known to us now because we bothered to stand by his grave. So
with Hong Kong reverting to Chinese rule, the man who chairs the Royal British Legion's Hong Kong and China branch hopes Beijing will continue to allow Remembrance Day parades to go ahead. That would mean allowing veterans from Britain and allied nations to raise their national flags on the cenotaph in Central.
Just for one day. But every other day it could be the Chinese flag in the middle, as I hope it will be, hoisted with reverence and lowered at sunset, as the British have done, and the Bohemia flag to the right. Then everybody in Hong Kong will be able to look at that cenotaph every morning and understand what it is.
For Jack and other veterans, the politics of today should not be a hindrance to remembering the past.
We always said in action and during the war, the bullet has got no political party, and the bullet doesn't know your religion. It doesn't matter. you're gone, you're gone. And that's why we got this wonderful comradeship, those of us who served in the war, not only with those of us of our own race and religion, but all races and religions, because we're all fighting for one cause.